Story 1. The Birthday Wish. Sarah hated her birthdays. Each year, something strange always happened. Missing gifts, flickering lights, or eerie shadows moving just out of sight. But this year, she decided to ignore her dread and throw a big party. At exactly midnight, her guests encouraged her to blow out the candles and make a wish. Reluctantly, Sarah closed her eyes and silently wished for happiness. She blew out the candles, and the room plunged into darkness. Laughter turned to uneasy whispers as someone tried to flick the lights back on, but they wouldn't work. Suddenly, Sarah felt a hand brush her shoulder, then another, and another. She gasped, spinning around, but there was no one close enough to touch her. "Who's messing around?" she called out nervously. Her guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one confessed. Then, from the shadows of the room, a low voice whispered directly in her ear, "I heard your wish, but happiness comes at a price." The lights flickered back on, and everyone was accounted for, except one guest. A friend Sarah hadn't noticed was missing. Her best friend Jessica was gone, her coat and purse still by the door, but she had vanished. Days passed, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica had been taken because of her wish. Her happiness increased with every passing moment, but so did the guilt. Then, on the anniversary of her birthday, Sarah received a letter in the mail. It was Jessica's handwriting. "I'm still here, Sarah, watching. You can have happiness for one more year. But what will you lose next?" Story 2. The Birthday Picture. Tommy loved his birthday more than anything. His parents always threw him the biggest parties, and this year was no different. Turning 12 meant even more presents, more friends, and the best cake he'd ever seen. But the real excitement came when his mother brought out her old Polaroid camera to take pictures. She snapped a few shots of Tommy blowing out his candles, surrounded by his friends, everyone laughing and clapping. The photos developed instantly, capturing moments of joy. But when Tommy looked at the photos later that night, something was wrong. In the first picture, everyone was smiling, except for a strange figure standing in the back. A tall, shadowy man with no distinct features. Tommy didn't remember anyone like that at the party. In the next photo, the figure was closer, leaning in toward his friends. Each photo after that showed the shadow man inching closer to Tommy, until in the last one, the figure was standing right behind him, a hand on Tommy's shoulder. Panicked, Tommy showed his parents, but they laughed it off. "It's probably just a trick of the light," his dad said, though he looked a bit unsettled. That night, as Tommy lay in bed, he heard the click of a camera from the corner of his room. He sat up and squinted in the dark, but nothing was there. Then another click, closer this time. Tommy's heart raced. He slowly reached for his bedside lamp, turning it on. The Polaroid camera sat on his desk, but the flash went off on its own, aimed right at him. Tommy's breath caught in his throat as the photo developed. His hands shook as he looked at the image. There was the shadowy figure standing right next to his bed, his hand stretched out, inches from Tommy's face. The lights flickered. When they steadied, the shadowy man was no longer just in the picture. Story 3. The Birthday Cake. It was Mia's 18th birthday, and her family had gone all out. A huge party with friends, music, and of course the grandest cake she had ever seen. 3 layers of perfection covered in delicate white icing. But as they gathered around to sing happy birthday, Mia noticed something strange about the cake. In the center, just barely noticeable beneath the frosting, was a small hairline crack. It ran through the top layer like a scar. Mia pointed it out to her mother, who brushed it off as a simple flaw in the baking process. But Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the song ended and Mia made her wish, she cut into the cake. The knife stopped abruptly as if hitting something hard. Confused, Mia tried again and again, until her knife clanged against something solid inside the cake. Slowly, she pried apart the layers and gasped. Inside was a small, withered doll. its body wrapped in thread and nails driven into its tiny limbs. The guests fell silent, staring at the grotesque sight. Mia's mother turned pale. I don't know how it got there," she stammered. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Mia sat in her room, the doll sitting on her desk, though she had no idea why she'd brought it with her. She felt drawn to it, compelled to keep it close. At midnight, Mia woke to a strange rustling noise. She glanced at the desk and froze. The doll had moved. Its head was now turned toward her, its black eyes gleaming in the dim light. Slowly, the doll's mouth creaked open, and a faint whisper filled the room. "Happy birthday, Mia. Make a wish." Terror gripped her as she realized the doll's voice was growing louder. The doll's stitched mouth moved unnaturally as it spoke again. "You should never have opened the cake." Story 4. The Birthday Guest. Lucas didn't want a big celebration for his 25th birthday. He'd just moved into a new apartment, and the idea of having people over felt exhausting. But his friends insisted, so he relented, inviting a small group for drinks and cake. As the evening went on, he noticed an unfamiliar face in the crowd. A tall man dressed in old-fashioned clothes stood quietly in the corner, watching. Lucas assumed he was a friend of a friend, though something about the man's intense stare unnerved him. The man didn't speak all night, just stayed in his corner, observing. As midnight approached and guests began to leave, Lucas found himself alone with the stranger. "Hey, are you leaving soon?" Lucas asked, trying to sound casual. The man didn't respond. Instead, he stepped forward, his shoes echoing unnaturally loud against the floor. A chill ran through Lucas's body as the air seemed to thicken. "I asked if you were—" Lucas's voice cut off as the man suddenly grinned, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. His eyes, once dull and lifeless, flared with a burning light. "I've been waiting for this night for a long time, Lucas," the man whispered, "since the day you were born." Lucas tried to back away, but the man moved faster than should have been possible. Cold fingers wrapped around his wrist, pulling him close. Lucas could smell the decay on the man's breath. "Your time is up," the man said softly, leaning in close. "I'm here to collect." With that, Lucas felt his heart stutter, his vision growing dark. The last thing he saw was the man's smile widening before everything went black. When his friends returned the next day to pick up some things they left behind, Lucas was gone. The only sign of him was a single birthday candle, still burning on the counter, and a lingering sense that something far older had come to claim him. Story 5. The Party Favored. Sophie had been looking forward to her 21st birthday for months. Her friends had planned a huge surprise party, and the excitement was electric. The night was filled with laughter, drinks, and games. But the real surprise came when her best friend handed her a small, ornate box as a party favor. "Open it after midnight," her friend whispered with a sly smile. Curious, Sophie waited until the last guest had left, and she was alone in her apartment. She opened the box at exactly 1 a.m. Inside was a small mirror, no bigger than her palm. It had an intricate frame made of twisted metal and strange symbols that Sophie didn't recognize. When she looked into the mirror, her reflection seemed normal at first. But as she stared, something shifted. Her reflection's eyes darkened, the pupils expanding until they were pitch black. The reflection smiled, though Sophie hadn't moved her lips. Startled, Sophie dropped the mirror, but instead of breaking, it rolled onto the floor. She hesitated, then picked it up, heart pounding. Her reflection now had a cruel, knowing look in its eyes. "Thank you for setting me free," it whispered, though Sophie hadn't said a word. Her hands trembled as the reflection stepped closer in the glass. Sophie felt a cold presence behind her, but when she turned around, nothing was there. When she faced the mirror again, her reflection was gone. The glass showed only her empty room. Cold breeze swept through her apartment, though no windows were open. From the shadows, a voice, her own voice, whispered, "I'm here now." Sophie dropped the mirror again, but this time it shattered into 1,000 pieces. She felt a strange pressure in her chest, like something was trying to push its way out, or in. On reflection, though shattered, appeared in each shard, watching her, grinning. And then the whispers began again, but this time they weren't just coming from the mirror. Story 6. The Forgotten Invitation. Claire had always loved her birthdays, and this year was no different. She planned an intimate dinner with close friends, inviting only those she held dear. But as the evening approached, Claire received a strange letter in her mailbox. It was an old, yellowed invitation, written in a language she didn't recognize. The wax seal on the envelope was unfamiliar, a symbol she couldn't place. The invitation read, "We cordially invite you to the celebration of Claire's 28th birthday. A guest of honor is long overdue." Confused, Claire shrugged it off as a prank, though something about it unsettled her. She showed it to her friends when they arrived, but no one could figure out where it had come from. They laughed it off, and the party continued without incident. But as the night wore on and the clock struck midnight, there was a knock at the door. Claire wasn't expecting anyone else, but curiosity got the best of her. She opened the door to find a tall, pale woman dressed in a black gown, holding a bouquet of wilted flowers. "I'm here for the celebration," the woman said in a voice that sounded like wind through dead leaves. Claire's friends gathered behind her, their smiles fading as they took in the strange visitor. "I think you have the wrong address," Claire stammered, trying to shut the door. But the woman stepped inside, her movements eerily fluid. "Oh no," she whispered, her eyes gleaming. "I'm right where I need to be. The invitation said so." One by one, Claire's friends began to feel faint, collapsing into their chairs or onto the floor, as though something was draining the life from the room. Claire, horrified, tried to push the woman back out, but the visitor simply smiled. "This birthday has been planned for a long time, Claire," she said, her voice low and menacing. "And I've waited years to claim what was promised to me." Before Claire could scream, the woman reached out and touched her cheek with icy fingers. Instantly, Claire felt her strength leave her body, her vision darkening as a cold numbness crept through her limbs. The last thing she heard before she fell into darkness was the woman's voice, whispering, "Happy birthday, my dear. May your soul rest eternally." Story 7. The Carousel. Every year on her birthday, Lydia's father took her to the same small, forgotten carnival on the edge of town. The place was old and falling apart, but it had one ride that fascinated her, an ancient carousel with painted horses that seemed to come alive under the dim lights. On her 13th birthday, Lydia noticed something strange. One of the carousel horses had changed. It had always been a cheerful white horse with a golden mane, but now it was a deep, unsettling black with red eyes that gleamed in the dark. Despite her unease, Lydia felt drawn to the horse. As she mounted it, the ride started. Though no one had pressed the button, the carousel spun faster and faster, and the world around her blurred into shadow. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The carousel stopped. Lydia tried to get off, but she couldn't move. The black horse's eyes rolled toward her, and she felt the wooden neck shift beneath her. The horse began to whisper in a raspy voice, "You can't leave until you pay the price for your wish." As Lydia's terror mounted, she realized the other horses were now watching her, their painted eyes following her every move. The black horse's mouth stretched into a grin. The price is steep for those who dare to dream. The lights flickered back on, and the carousel began to move on its own, slower now. Lydia could see her father standing outside looking in with a worried expression, but the glass separating them seemed to distort reality. She was trapped, forced to ride as the carnival around her faded into a dreamlike haze. Story 8. The Eerie Music Box. On her 16th birthday, Emily received a beautiful antique music box from her grandmother. It was adorned with intricate designs and a tiny ballerina that danced gracefully when the music played. Her grandmother warned her to never open it past midnight, but Emily, curious and enchanted, couldn't resist. As the clock struck 12, Emily opened the music box. The ballerina began to twirl, and the melody that played was hauntingly beautiful. But as the notes continued, they seemed to warp and twist into something darker. Suddenly, the music grew dissonant, and the ballerina's movements became erratic. Emily's room grew cold, and a dark mist began to seep from the music box, swirling around her. The music turned into a dirge, and Emily's reflection in the mirror twisted into a grotesque version of herself, its eyes hollow and menacing. Terrified, Emily tried to close the box, but the lid wouldn't budge. The dark mist coalesced into a shadowy figure that loomed over her. A whisper filled the room. "You've broken the pact. Now you must dance for eternity." Emily's feet began to move on their own, compelled to dance to the discordant music. The figure watched, its eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. Her room became a prison of shifting shadows and haunting melodies, and Emily danced until the morning light, forever trapped in the music box curse. Story 9. The Unseen Guest. For her 25th birthday, Lily threw a small dinner party at her newly renovated house. Everything was perfect. The food, the decorations, and the company. But halfway through the evening, Lily noticed something odd. One of the place settings had been changed. A chair had been added without anyone mentioning it. Lily asked her guests about the extra chair, but they all shrugged, saying they hadn't touched it. Throughout the night, she had a growing sense of unease, as though someone was watching her. When midnight approached, Lily decided to check the security footage from the cameras she'd had installed around the house. The footage showed a dark figure slipping in through the back door, moving silently through the house. The figure wore a tattered cloak, and its face was obscured by shadows. Lily felt her skin crawl as she watched the figure approach the dining room. On the video, the figure sat in the extra chair, and then the camera feed went static. Lily's heart pounded as she returned to the dining room. The chair was empty, but a cold draft swept through the room. Then she heard it, a soft, ghostly whisper, "Happy birthday, Lily." The lights flickered, and the figure appeared behind her in the reflection of a nearby mirror. It leaned in close and whispered again, "I've been waiting for this night for a long time." Panicked, Lily fled from the room, but the figure followed, growing closer with every step. As she reached the front door, it slammed shut. Lily turned, only to find the figure standing in front of her, its shadowy hand reaching out. Story 10. The Silent Birthday. On his 40th birthday, David decided to celebrate alone at his old family cabin in the woods. He cherished the solitude, away from the noise of everyday life. That evening, he prepared a simple meal and sat down to enjoy it by the fire. The only sound was the crackling of the logs and the occasional hoot of an owl outside. As the night wore on, David felt a strange chill in the air. The temperature dropped suddenly, and his breath became visible. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the drafty old cabin. At midnight, he decided to light a birthday candle on his dessert. As he prepared to make a wish, he noticed the flame flickering wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The cabin grew colder, and the wind outside howled through the trees. Suddenly, the fire went out, plunging the room into darkness. David fumbled for matches to relight the candle, but when he struck a match, he saw a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a tall, thin silhouette, its features obscured by the darkness. "Who's there?" David called out, his voice trembling. There was no response. The candle lit again, but the figure was gone. David's heart raced as he tried to convince himself it was a trick of the light. But then he noticed something even more disturbing. His reflection in the window was not his own. It showed a gaunt, hollow-eyed version of himself, smiling with an unsettling glee. The reflection's mouth moved silently, forming the words "Happy Birthday," though David could hear no sound. He turned to confront the figure, but the cabin was empty. The temperature continued to drop, and the whispers grew louder, though the wind outside had ceased. As David's breath grew visible and his body numbed from the cold, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He turned slowly, facing the empty room, only to hear a voice from behind him whisper, "You're not alone on your birthday." The candle flickered out once more, and the darkness enveloped him completely.